back up. And I've got an artificial intelligence. I was meant to say and what I was not meant to say. So yes, of course, this is going to be a bit of a different panel. And I remember meeting Neville in Dubai. The agency he worked for at that point in time had won an award. And that will also lead us into the topic of cultural diplomacy and what exactly it is. But before we do that, as you may be aware, the Deputy Minister unfortunately is not with us, so it's going to be a conversation. I grew up on the Cape Flats. Neville, where did you grow up?
Yeah, good afternoon and also good morning to everyone, and thank you for the invitation. My voice sounds like I'm very white because I think I'm catching the flu and it's already starting to push my voice. So just to answer your question, where did I grow up? Officially I grew up in Mahike, as it's known today. And that is where I did my schooling and even my junior degree. And then moved to Johannesburg for a little bit, and then found myself in KwaZulu-Natal for the greatest part of my life.
Wonderful. So the topic today is diplomacy. Can I have a show of hands in the room to indicate to us how many of you, A, are familiar with the word founder of power, and how many of you actually have been engaging on this topic? I want a left hand, a left hand, a left hand. Okay, all right. There's an overwhelming response of people who work in this space, but that's going to be great, so we can actually start at the beginning. But before we do that, a few opening remarks on my side. Connection, polarization in a world on edge. The power of building cultural bridges. And I'd like you to just think for a moment in terms of from the time you woke up this morning, right? You wake up and you realize, I woke up, I'm alive. You don't have to share with us, but what did you do when you woke up? Most of us have replaced our partners with devices. We don't even greet our partner, but we greet our device, right? It's a tragic state of affairs, isn't it? And then, of course, the reason I asked the question, because Neville is going to lead us on a journey around, in today's geopolitical recalibration and the shifting of the political axes, the world is in a very precarious juncture. Our world is more connected than ever before, as all the panels have been alluding to, more connected than ever before, yet whilst the digital revolution has shrunk distances, allowing ideas and information to travel at unprecedented speeds, paradoxically, this hyperconnectivity, not hyperpersonalization, seems to be accompanied by a surge in polarization. Now, isn't that ironic that one would have expected a great together of the global good, and yet we see the opposite taking place, even though we are disconnected. The walls, both physical and metaphorically, we are erecting. I mean, some of us, you know, we were talking about young people. I mean, I'm not even an elder. The way you were talking earlier in the room, I feel like I'm an ancestor looking down from above, or maybe I went to hell and I'm looking up, you know, because the conversation has moved to who is young and who is not. And allow me to segue, when you look at some of the founders and the creators of all this new technology, they are well over 40. Well over 40. So we must not over-romanticize the role of youth. We have to make sure that the youth create, because at the end of the day, never before has a generation been so extensively chronicled. Yet, the substantive achievements of this highly chronicled generation, whether it's Gen Zs, the millennials, and now the Gen Alphas, The contribution of young people today seems comparatively limited. And I am a mother of young boys, and I always say, give me something that will last into the next 10 generations. So, having said that, so with all these divides deepening level along political, ideological, and even cultural lines, we have an opportunity to forge new alliances in this world on edge. And how do we find common ground? So, cultural diplomacy, and how we can use cultural diplomacy to foster this common ground. And by the way, give him a round of applause, welcome him back to Gauteng, welcome him back to Joburg, because for the last 15 years he's been working in KZN. And I'd also like to share with us how you did economic diplomacy and what are the connections. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think most of what you've alluded to in your preamble is quite important. Just talking about cultural diplomacy, I think before I even go there, just to remind everyone what happened during, after World War II. There was this huge divide in the world, particularly related to the Russian Federation and the rest of the world. And the only way that you could actually see the war talking to itself was not necessarily through guns, but they used sports, they used culture, they used other forms to actually fight with each other. So hence, during those years, if you're as old as some of us, a lot of times you would see in the Olympics or most of these international platforms where there was big competitions between different countries, that it was either the Russians or the US or the Brits who emerged. Of course, that has changed with time, that we've seen other nations really pulling through. China is coming on quite strong. So it leads me to the point of cultural diplomacy, in that at the time, of course, sports was the core. Now here we're talking specifically culture, and through culture you can bridge a lot of divide. And within the context of bridging that divide is also ensuring that your message resonates in the environment that you want to push your message in. Because within cultural diplomacy, it can also be a danger in that propaganda can be pushed to do that. So one has to be very careful how one embraces something coming into your region, and how you also craft a message wanting to take it outside of your region. So in as much as it's very important to have culture at the center of diplomacy, we've got to use it the right way. Because if you use it the wrong way, it'll send the wrong message.
You know, it's very interesting, this idea of the right way, because I'm reminded of Gracia Maloney, the Italian politician who goes out and says, I'm a Christian, I'm a Democrat, I'm a mother, I'm a Catholic. And yet, if you look at the right wing in Italy today, she's part of the right wing movement. So talk a little bit to us about when you talk about the right way, what exactly do you mean? Because my ethics and your ethics, my morality and your morality could be quite different. And in a world where we say, let's do away with DEI, so what is the right way?
Yeah, so unfortunately we find ourselves in a world where some of our cultural platforms, let's talk phone, can be used in a way to send a certain message, either negatively or positively about a certain nation. So, for example, a lot of the content that we see related to, for example, the Middle East, particularly the Muslim community, the Arab nations, tend to create the impression that as soon as you see a specific individual, you must have a certain bias. Or I can give you another example where in most of the movies, particularly coming from the West, somebody speaking with a Russian accent has got something to do with the mafia, etc. So that's the part that I'm saying is the wrong way, where you're actually seeking to portray another nation in the incorrect way. portraying yourself as the hero within it. I know these are movies, but at the end of the day, one also has to understand the undertones within that. But if you use it the correct way is ensuring that the message that you're sending out is balanced, rather than only specifically one-sided and seeking to push a political narrative. Then that is where you are failing the nation.
So in your role as the newly appointed, newly minted CEO of Brand SA, you know, we've got Brand SA, we've got Made in South Africa, we've got Proudly SA, and then you've got the government instruments. Share with us what your vision is as the new leader and how you will use your vision as the new CEO to go out there into the world to promote who we are as a country, using soft diplomacy or cultural diplomacy. And, you know, we have no politicians on the panel. I don't know, you're political, no, you're not. So no holy cows in the room. And let's deal with some of the matters that are dividing South Africa in terms of our relationships, and then we'll come to the role of culture in colonial imperialism or cultural imperialism.
One of the critical areas that I have identified is that since COVID, you know, if you recall, just before we were hit by COVID, and when the president started the family meetings, there was a sense of really aligning ourselves to the principles of how are we to follow our leadership. And you would have seen a sense of unity also within government. As soon as we were hit by COVID itself, and then you started seeing the repercussions and the implications of COVID, jobs, family dynamics, etc. All those created a new problem for us, which I don't believe that we've truly recovered from. So, and one of those problems has really created a sense of saying, us as South Africans, how do we ensure that we continue to become relevant even within our own country? How do we continue being patriotic in a way that will be more positive, rather than what we're seeing currently with some groups saying certain things about the country globally. So from my side, coming in, I'm wanting to actually instill that sense of patriotism, but not patriotism with blinkers. Patriotism saying, where there's a challenge, how do I also contribute to improving that system? Or how do I hold others accountable to make sure that what they seek to deliver on actually deliver on that? So that's very, very critical. When you go into certain destinations and certain markets, you see how, in as much as there's a lot of adversity within their markets and their regions, that they're still very proud of their own flag. They're still very, very proud of even flying the flag or keeping it on their shoulders. So that's one thing that we need to embrace as South Africans, to ensure that we don't only fly the flag when the rugby game is on, or when Bafana Bafana makes it into the next round, and we start praying that they make it to the next round. You know, when there's an event like that, then we start flying the flag. It should be inherent on us to always be proud of our flag, but you can only be proud of your flag and become an ambassador to your country if you actually do something about it, rather than sitting back. And that's very, very critical.
So, flag to erect the flag. So, flag to erect the flag pole.
So the point that I'm making is every single one of us must have our own flags that we're flying at home, but within that flag must be the South African flag at the top of it, and then your cultural principles within it. Not 30 million for a big flag.
Okay. There are a couple of people in the room here that need the 50 million to just finance the rebate that's fallen apart in terms of film. So just, you know, because often we are very critical of our institutions and our leaders, but we are critical in the absence of actually knowing what is the mandate, what is the vision. So tell us who your organization is and how you plug into the various institutional arrangements that are meant to promote South Africa. I mean, you work through an equivalent of DTIC you've got all these people and there's so much confusion. You go to Davos. What are you doing at Davos? GCIS goes to Davos. You know, help us understand the multiplicity, and I guess maybe the lack of integration, but maybe us on the outside, we don't see what you do. So take us on this journey.
So Brand South Africa is the official marketing agency for the country, South Africa. So we are
you heard that. Not SA Tourism, Brand SA. Continue.
Yes. So tourism focuses on the sector tourism and making sure that tourists come. They're also a destination marketing agency, but they focus mostly on making sure that the hotels are full, the aircrafts, there's bums on seats. Ours is really to ensure that we work across the board, not only on the tourism sector, the trade, the investment, the social issues. That's why we're here, we're supporting Creative Cnergy, because it's a sector that is so important in terms of driving the messaging across the line in terms of how South Africa is, and this is a very important sector for us as well. So we work across the sectors in ensuring that the types of messages that go out are positive in terms of South Africa. You would have seen daily, and all you need to do is actually listen to the news. The news will tell you all the bad stories. But South Africa is not there. And that is where we come in to actually market and promote the good that is in South Africa to the global world. I've traveled through my lifetime, obviously with the work that I do, and have seen so many destinations, and there's no place like South Africa. And that is the message that the world needs to know and understand. So if you will be, just to explain now the differences, Proudly South Africa, and my colleague is here, and I think we can
raise your hand, colleague.
Happy is here. I think she just stepped out, and I think the CEO is going to be speaking shortly as well. They specifically deal with products. So they support the Proudly South African product to make sure that we encourage companies to produce products locally. And then other agencies, of course, will have their own mandates. The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition will obviously focus on the incentives as well as support for businesses, Department of Small Business, so all those, I mean, I'm not going to tell you about every single department, but in essence, that is the distinct difference between ourselves and them. But we collaborate. Why are we in Davos? We are in Davos because of our mandate is really to ensure that when we go to a global platform like the World Economic Forum, that we are able to coordinate Team South Africa, and we drive the messaging together with our partners as well as with the departments in ensuring that there's uniformity, and South Africa has got one home. So the whole Team South Africa approach really comes from that aspect of ensuring that we are able to coordinate the participation of South Africa in Davos. We also support programs either it is, the President is leading delegations in specific markets to ensure that from a branding and a positioning perspective, we are in the market early to ensure we get economic data that can come back, feed it back home, ensure that the private sector that participate are well aware of the dynamics in that market, etc. So it's a whole lot of activities that we're involved in. So as Brand South Africa, we've got within our mandate 2 platforms. One, the domestic market, which occupies about 30% of our time and resources in terms of marketing the country domestically, because we believe that the ambassadorship starts at home. You can't just talk ambassadorship just globally. And then 30% of our work sorry, 70% of our work then would then be international.
Where are the gaps and why are there gaps? And talk to us a little bit more specifically, because I talked about connectivity and polarization and the world that is on edge. And I think as a country, we made the right decision in terms of some of our positions globally, especially in relation to one of the biggest crises in the world, the genocide in Gaza, which has caused us to become a thorn in the side of maybe, you know, the world's most powerful nation. Let's see how that pans out. And then a few other issues. So how do you, if you take a position like South Africa's policy position, not just in the criminal justice court, but our very strong position around DEI, diversity, inclusion, and equity, and black economic empowerment, etc. I don't know about the people in the room, but you know, where do we see the evidence of the work you do, and what are the messages? How, for instance, are you grappling as Brand SA with the fallout between the US and South Africa, our relationship with BRICS Plus? You know, you're in a room here of people who are committed to the South African narrative, and we actively curate it in the creative sector. And yet, I don't know about you in the room, are you familiar with, say, your unifying message, the pillars, and how all the messages will converge with a Make South Africa Great Again?
South Africa is great. South Africa is great.
Greater.
I wouldn't want to start competing with Donald Trump. So the issue really between, so let me deal with the elephant in the room. South Africa's relations with the US, right? So there's two parts to that. One is the diplomatic channel, which is driven through the presidency and Department of International Relations, and handling that at a diplomatic level. And I think the president has been quite clear. He's not going to engage another destination, another country on X or on social media, because that is not how the fabric of our nation is actually built. So he will follow the diplomatic channels to ensure that he engages with the US. As a threat to that is the understanding that the United States is a very important partner to South Africa, and the United States, with its challenges, does not mean they are our enemy. It just means that they're going through a phase. And what we're experiencing as South Africa is not unique to South Africa. And you would have seen in the last few days, President Trump had a long list of countries that he was putting tariffs against, etc. And even now I saw China has retaliated. So that now becomes the trade war. So, which is fine. That's their prerogative as the United States to decide whichever direction that they want to portray. As Brand South Africa, where we come in, we are focused on three areas. One is how we ensure that we continue to reinforce the message about South Africa being open to do business, South Africa being a safe country, and dispelling the myths and the untruths that are currently being toyed around in the US. Because at the moment, if you don't have a first right to response, then people will continue echoing the message on your behalf. But they will then decide how they give that message. So we are focusing purely on that in terms of the American market and how we respond in the American market. We've got a process dealing with that. The second part is dealing with friends of South Africa. These are now American businesses or American stars who really believe in South Africa. Two structures wanted to actually take programs in other countries. One, they were going to take a program into Germany. They phoned and said, listen, we redirected this program, we're bringing it to South Africa, where you're going to see 400 business people coming from the US, actually amplifying the message that the American businesses are still keen to do business with South Africa, and they know that the myths that are being, and the messaging that is being articulated in the US is incorrect. And then the second one is basically a public lecture. One of its leaders in the US is actually going to bring that public lecture to South Africa. So it's basically,
his name if you can, please.
Or her name.
Or her name.
So it's his or her. It's one of the two. But civil rights leader. So and that would be a big positive in showcasing that the US is not closed, despite what we're seeing at a political level. There are a lot of friends of South Africa who are keen to continue doing business. Even some of the business investments that we've seen, others newly announced. 2 weeks ago, you and I were at the Gauteng Investment Conference. New investments that are being announced coming from the US. So business will still continue doing business despite what we currently see. There is going to be a hiccup. What it creates for us, and this is my message to you, is You need to open up to other markets, to other regions, and don't forget the African continent. Because most times, we tend to always just look at the West, and we forget that there's a lot of opportunities within the African continent. So you must really try look across the border. You don't have to go and showcase yourself always in Cannes or in Miami or in LA. You can also do it in Nigeria, you can do it in Kenya, you can do it, you can also mobilize within the SADC region. So that is so, so important.
Last question. So your relationship with the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, who technically or globally best practice, they drive cultural diplomacy. And the French, for those of you in the room, you've got Alliance Francaise, the Italians, you've got Dante Alighieri. We don't have a presence of the Confucius Institute in South Africa. We do. The Koreans have built a beautiful cultural center, the South Koreans in Pretoria. What are we doing as a country practically? We always talk about a certain genre of music, yet our single, and this is not about, people say opera snobbery, yet, some of our greatest opera singers come from some of the most marginalized areas of South Africa. And on every major opera stage in the world, there is the lead soprano South African, the lead baritone is South African. What should we be doing to spread the message around our multicultural diversity historically that comes back to the days of, the great foundations in South Africa? We don't even promote Oliver Tobias's work or Professor Tobias's work in paleontology. So culture is not only music, it's multifaceted. And what instruments do we use globally?
Yeah, and I think you would have heard the minister in his opening remarks this morning, where he continues to apologize to the sector, because you do need that level of support from government. So I can't speak on behalf of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, because I don't work with the department. We collaborate on certain programs only with them. So I think in terms of the programs and what they seek to do, etc., unfortunately, I can't speak on their behalf. But what I do know is from the sector side, the sector needs to be united and coordinated accordingly, because if you're not formalized as a sector, and if you're fragmented too much, then you don't get to be listened to in different markets. So that's very, very important. Number two, from a policy level, if you don't coordinate yourself in terms of lobbying, in terms of the policy directive of how the country is leading the sector, then again you're going to be left behind. Somebody is going to decide for you. So that's very, very critical. Number three is holding the departments accountable to ensure that they actually support the sector. But you can't do it individually. You've got to do it as a collective. It makes it a lot easier. The voice is a lot greater to be heard. So for me, those are the three basic principles. If you don't have those three basic principles on hand, then you're going to remain fragmented.
Thank you. I presume we've run out of time. Is that correct? Or not?
So I've almost time, because I really love the points that you made, and I think when we have people from South Africa in a room, let's take the time to educate them, not just educate literacy, because I love the fact that you've broken down what brand South Africa is, and everybody can appreciate that. So I'm going to allow for at least 3 or 4 questions, and it felt beautifully because after this we'll then hear from proudly South African, and then it differentiates it. What I don't want to do is create a conference where we're just bulldozing through presentations, but we're not getting context. So I've borrowed and stole some time elsewhere so that we can have then questions from the audience. I am, however, going to protect Neville at this time and say, I'm going to pick up on what he said. He's not working for the other departments. So please ask him either cultural diplomacy or on brand South Africa so we can get as much richness out of it. The other questions you can come bring it to myself or Colin. We are going to then take the report to the various stakeholders. So if we could just allow that
So while Tammy is collecting the questions, we need to be very clear in our minds around the power of soft power, how you formulate a strategy as a country in terms of soft power. And we don't like to talk about anything soft because soft is often feminine and all the rest of it, and maybe that's a good idea. But because we as a sector, the creative sector, are often thought of not even as part of the main course, we don't even come in as a starter or a dessert. At the end of all of these amazing events, they'll talk about, oh, what are we going to do about entertainment? And then we are delegated to a space that does not appreciate the power of the sector in economic terms, but over and above that, around the consciousness and the psyche of what makes you a nation.
So for G20 this year, so we're looking at several streams. One, of course, is the B20 and how we support the business side. It's very important that we align ourselves in that regard. This is not talking as brand SA. We're looking at Y20, which is the youth segment, W20, the women's segment, and then across other departments, the departments that I have now specifically elevated. Treasury is important, trade, industry and competition, tourism, arts, culture, sports and recreation. So for me, those are very, very critical. If I don't elevate those, I'm going to find myself all over the show because we get a lot of requests as brand SA, and I also need to make it clear we're not a bank. We want to collaborate to support sectors, but we're not a bank. We don't fund individuals. We don't fund everything willy-nilly because we're not a bank. But we look at strategic partnerships in specific markets to address a specific issue. So I just want to repeat that. Brand SA is not a bank. We don't fund individuals. We don't fund. So please make sure that when you ask me a question, don't ask me what are you going to fund me for X. But if you're talking about a sector, formalized, I'm happy to have a discussion with you with respect to that.
Thank you so much. I was just using my diplomacy antenna, making sure that we also give you a chance to people who haven't had an opportunity to ask. That's why I had to do that. Otherwise, then we don't get to out in the time when everybody wants to engage. So we've identified 5 of you. I literally need your question to be succinct. If it's not, I'm going to interject because we do want to give everybody an opportunity. So over to you.
Actually, he's already answered some of my questions. What I wanted to ask is that the creative sector is the most powerful platform to use in terms of selling the country or selling brand SA. How do we use brand SA as a strategic partner to DSEC, DTI, to invest sustainably, continuously into the industry?
Thank you. Are you okay if I take 2, 2, 3? Do you want your pen?
Yeah, I forgot to take a pen, but
okay, let's take one.
Yeah, so we've just come back from New York 3 or 4 weeks ago, not myself, but my team, in support of Cnergy. And when we were requested to support Cnergy as part of as well as DIRCO, as part of the programs under G20, we were able to bring in South African artists in New York to support the events that were taking place. So that's what we try and do as best as possible. That in a lot of the platforms that are driven either at the government level or in partnership with the private sector, that the sector is also not forgotten as part of that. The only part that is missing is ensuring that the voice of the sector tends to resonate and influence the program. So I think that's the next step. So one thing at a time. For us, that is how that's how we're trying to do it as much as possible, so that the sector is, as I'm saying, not forgotten. The cultural element of South Africa is also communicated in those markets, whether it's singing or dancing or even showing a short movie clip. etc. within those markets. So that's how we try and do it, but I'm sure we can do more.
Thank you. Let's go to the second question.
Thank you very much.
Maybe introduce yourselves unless you feel your brands are that omnipresent and potent and powerful that everybody knows you. I can assure you if I bumped into Black Coffee in the street, I wouldn't know who he is. Maybe you Black Coffee, I don't know.
I am Black Coffee. No, my name is Tate Mokoro. I'm with TEDx Johannesburg. All right. So congratulations. Well, thank you, Julie, and congratulations, Neville, on your new job, new challenge. Our brand South Africa is a big brand. You're not going to be able to sell it alone. You need lots of partners, you need cooperation, people who can do good things outside of your own office. But I want to understand, and I know you're not the bank, I want to understand then what sort of partnerships, what sort of strategic partnerships are you looking for to help you do that work?
Great.
Yeah, it's a tough question because it's no one size fits all. Because if we did that, then we're going to exclude a lot of people. So it just depends on the substance that comes to us, whether it talks to our brand focus and our mandate, and whether it's supporting a sector. Sometimes you find that in one sector we have, let me just say, water distributors, and then you have 10 of them approaching us for 10 different platforms. We have to now decide which one we choose, and we find that we end up stretching the rand a little bit too much. So where we have 10 rand, then we end up putting 1 rand, 1 rand, 1 rand, 1 rand, so that all 10 can benefit. But in the long run, when you think about it, it's not that progressive. You'd rather ensure that you say, okay, we'll do 2 rand 50, 2 rand 50, and then 1 rand, 1 rand, 1 rand, 1 rand. I know not 10 people will benefit, but the impact is greater with the 2 rand 50 and 2 rand 50, if you understand what I'm saying. So I'm trying to simplify to say to you, it's not one size fits all. So we may be present here today, and there's something happening next week and you don't see us. Don't criticize us for not being there, because we have to also look at how much we've got and how we're able to partner. So for us, it has to focus, for example, this year, I mean, the gold mine is G20, guys. But please don't label everything G20, J, and then, apologies, just switch this off. But it's got to make sure that it ties in also with the sector, who you're representing, and the impact of what you're seeking to do.
Fantastic. Let's go to the third question.
Hi everyone, my name is Mara Tukau, and I'd like to actually build on what the two previous speakers spoke of, which is that one of the things that's most powerful about American films and series is that you always see that American flag outside every home. There's something that seeps into the psyche of the Americans. You spoke about World War II and how the media was used afterwards. American cinema always uses their planes to be on top all the time. The Japanese planes are always at the bottom. Why am I saying all of this? I'm saying that there is, I feel, a missing cohesive narrative about what is South Africa. And I'm not saying that there's one thing. Perhaps our diversity is our story. And this fragmentation, whether in strategy or financing, is part of the challenges, I suppose, something as powerful as brand has got to face. So I think one of the things that we as a sector can perhaps bring to this is this idea of like, what is the story that we're telling beyond our own individual needs? Because branders say, through media, through television, through the films that we tell, can go beyond the trinkets and dancing and, you know, cultural, la la la. You know, we can do more.
Cultural, la la la. I love that. I think there was more.
Yeah, I love the comment, and look, I agree 100% with your sentiments. And the more we diversify, the more we become more creative. And I think this morning I had an interview on, I had 2 interviews this morning. One of them was on Channel 403, what did they call it? 403, Newsroom Africa, sorry, my apologies. I was on Newsroom Africa this morning, and one of the questions, because we've just done a State of the Nation brand survey, where we actually surveyed the South Africans, and one of the common threads that has come out quite strong, when you look at the past few years, how South Africans identify themselves, and 53% say, at first we identify ourselves as South African. Newsroom said to me, by the way, we also did a poll before we interviewed you. So we wanted to check where you're standing with this. And their polls showed that South Africans will say they identify more South Africans, they will do 65%. So it gets to show how that sense of optimism is there within the country, and we can do more with it. I think we need to be creative, let's unpack it and see how we continue our message, because for us, this sector is so important. It helps us echo the messages without us having to work too hard at it, including sports. You know, so...
No, we don't want to go to sport. Let's leave sport aside if we're talking arts and culture. But is it time up?
So let's do the last two questions.
Yeah, just the last two, but we need to wrap up. Keep it as quick as possible so we can give probably essays and time.
Thank you very much. My name is Dimitri Martinez. Neville, thank you for bringing up the question of coordination within the sector. And yes, we've made quite a lot of progress. There's organizations such as SASFED, Creative Cnergy has now been established, you know, so it is happening. What about from the side of government, where we're seeing, for example, we have a cultural industries strategy, we've got a digital economy strategy, we're not seeing the whole of government approach. And is Brand SA, for example, able to assist in getting that kind of synergy going and sort of policy coherence and regulatory certainty that helps to bring that focus in government? And very quickly, Judy,
No, we can only take one.
co-production
We can only
treaties.
take one. We really have run out of time.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
All right, thank you.
So I'd be happy to help. I'd be happy to form part of that. As I said, I don't take decisions on their behalf, but where I'm able to pull them together, I mean, I used to do it with Natal, where government departments, they love working in silos. So does the sector, by the way. But if we're able to pull government into one room, key decision makers, and the same within the sector, you're able to pull all the decision makers together into one room, and then we agree on the process to have almost like we had I come from the investment attraction side, where we had a one-stop shop approach. I'm happy to do that. So that I can put as my commitment.
Yeah, and just in conclusion on my side, you know, we have the one-stop shops in all the provinces, and having the opportunity to serve on the Presidential Council on State of Entity Transformation, I mean, this is where you really see the evidence of absolute uncoordination. And that's what's led to the state of our SOEs. But the power of human connection can never be undervalued nor underestimated. And when we talk about a world being polarized, we as South Africans are being polarized. And what has been refreshing about the room today is it's one of the few occasions that I've come into a room where there's actually a representation of who South Africa is. When I walk into a room normally, it is only one demographic. And that's part of the challenge we have. We no longer have conversations with each other as South Africans. We have become ghettoized and polarized, and that cannot augur well for a nation that needs to sell itself. We sell ourselves to each other, first and foremost, and then it cascades up. Those are my closing comments.
I have to honor that last question to Neville. I have to value my word.
Good morning, my name is Sibare. I represent the Art Foundation. We do festivals and audience development initiatives. The question I had for you, Neville, is you mentioned that you have a 70%, your budget is 70-30, where 70 is international and 30 is local. And I agree with you that South Africa is one of the best countries, if not the best country in the world. But a lot of South Africans don't seem to know that. So how can us or you, is that 30% enough for the local, for you doing the local brand SA work, is that enough, or should you maybe increase it and maybe make South Africa more proud of our country and be able to be brand ambassadors and make your job a little bit easier? Should you maybe adjust that 70-30 and make it a little bit more, maybe 60-40? That's just my question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we, at inception, we were 100% international, and a few years ago, I think about 10 years ago, that mandate then changed to say we need to also start doing domestic. So I'm not close to that suggestion, because I believe that you need to start at home. You really need to start at home. The point made about American flags flying all over, it's not just in the movies. When you're there, for a lot of you who've been to the US, you drive through a neighborhood. The first time I went to the US, when I was driving through a neighborhood, I thought, oh, so many government buildings. It was actually residential homes. People fly the flag. Why are we not flying our own flag? So we need to really start, and that patriotism is there through and through, regardless of who's in leadership. The US, they are so patriotic, they love their flag, and we need to start loving our own flags as well. Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause, please, everybody. Please don't go. I'm going to ask you to stand just in front of the table so we can do it.
You're going to make a chance?
No. Well, you want